Hello. This Sunday, this Palm Sunday, I thought I would try something different. I thought this Palm Sunday I would read you a story. This story is called The Donkey's Day Out. Now, I can show you the pictures, but there's quite a lot to read, so I'll have to read it out to you. Fred was the donkey at Hoggart's farm. He shared his field with 3 cows called Polly, Molly, and Joan, who all had black patches on their broad white backs. You see them there. Fred had a cross on his back. When he was a foal, he'd asked his mother about it, but she didn't know why. All donkeys have them, she told him, peacefully munching thistles. That was long ago, and now Fred was old. Sometimes, when Polly, Molly and Joan were having one of their special cow talks, he would stand and dream under the willow trees. He would think about the awful morning when he had been taken from his mother and brought to Hoggart's in an old green horse-box. How frightened he'd been that day, how lonely, and how he'd longed to leap across the broad blue river and go back to his old familiar field. But then Mrs. Hoggart had come to see him. She'd tied a big yellow bow round his neck, patted him, and said kindly, "There, Fred, you're going to look very handsome indeed. You're going to be a special birthday present from my son John." John's birthday party was in the paddock, under the willow trees. There was cake and ice cream for the children and a juicy red apple for Fred. When all the food had been eaten, everybody took turns at climbing onto Fred's back and riding him up and down. John was grown up now, and they called him Mr. John. Everything was changing. Old Farmer Hoggart and his wife were moving to a cottage in the village, and Mr. John was getting rid of all the farm animals to make room for horses. They would jump high fences and win gold and silver cups. Some special stable boys were coming to look after them. One day, Fred woke up from his after-dinner nap and saw Polly, Molly, and Joan all being driven out of the paddock. The space was needed for one of the new horses, and the cows had been sold to Farmer Hill up the lane. It felt lonely without his friends, and Fred was frightened. If all the animals were going to new homes, what would happen to him? Every time he saw Mr. John, Fred ran and hid. Very soon that old green horse box would stop by the gate, and he would be pushed into it and driven away to another farm. One morning, a horse box did arrive, but it was a shining white horse box with silver wheels. Mr. John and William, the chief stable boy, were leading something out of it. Look at that. It was a young horse, jet black, and he looked very scared. Fred saw him plunge and kick and shy away as they tried to get him through the gate. As he reared up, the sun gleamed on his glossy neck and his terrified eyes flashed fire. Then the 2 men walked across the grass. "Now," thought Fred, cowering away, "now they'll grab me and drive me off in that awful box," and he started to shake. But he was wrong. William brought the black horse, soothed him, and then let him go while Mr. John patted Fred's tubby sides. "Calm down, old chap," he said to the horse. "He's a great jumper, but he's very nervous. You calm him down," he said to Fred, and then they went away. Fred felt proud and happy. He wasn't going to be sold after all. He was staying to look after this young racehorse. "What's your name?" he said, trotting up to him. "Tarquin." "That's a good name." "It's the name of a king," the horse said proudly. "What's yours?" Fred." Sounded a bit silly after Tarquin. The horse dropped his head and started to graze, and they didn't talk any more then. But in the night, Fred heard a little snuffling noise. Tarquin the Proud was crying. "What's the matter?" asked Fred, snuggling up to him. "I was dreaming about my mother. We were in a horse box once and it crashed and she was killed and I miss her so much." And a tear rolled down Tarquin's nose. "Never mind," Fred said. "You've got me." To cheer him up, he told him all about Hoggarts and how he used to be Mr. John's special pet and how he didn't like horse boxes either. And when the sun came up over the river, they were still talking. Tarquin and Fred were already firm friends. In the long summer days, when the grass was thick and lush, the two lived happily together in the field by the river. But when the cold weather started, Mr. John caught Tarquin and William leapt onto his back. "Winter quarters for you, my lad," he said. "Your stable's ready, all snug and warm, and it's fit for a king in there. Come on." But Tarquin wouldn't go when he saw that Fred had to stay behind and spend the winter in a broken down old shed. He reared and bucked and lashed out with his hooves until William fell off. Then he ran down to his friend under the trees, nuzzling at his neck for comfort. 3 times William tried to get back up on Tarquin, and 3 times he was thrown off. At last he shook his head. "It's no good, Mr. John. That old donkey's going to have to come too." So Fred found himself walking behind Tarquin up the lane and into the new station yard. From their stalls, beautiful horses stared out at him, chestnut and white and dapple grey. But none of them was as beautiful as his own black Tarquin. In their stable, the straw was so deep it came up to his old knobbly knees, and there were food bags stuffed with sweet-smelling hay. There was even a heater for frosty nights. How different it was from his old tumble-down shack by the river, where mice scampered round his feet and gales blew through the cracks in the walls. "Aren't you the lucky one, Fred?" said William, rubbing down Tarquin's glossy black coat. "This horse is going to be a real winner. He'll be running in big races one day." Fred munched the wonderful hay and tried not to listen, because Tarquin had already told him about high hedges and fences we would have to jump, and how horses sometimes crashed into each other and then riders limped home on crutches with their heads all bandaged, and he didn't want his best friend to get hurt. Next morning, he heard the clatter of hooves outside. The stable boys were leading the horses round and round the yard. They had rugs on their backs and funny little hoods to keep their ears warm. "Boggies, boys," shouted William, and they were off, away to the downs to canter and gallop and jump. In the cold air, the breath from their nostrils puffed out like steam engines. At first, Tarquin only ran in little races. Fred always stood nearby in the yard until they got him into the horse box. Tarquin wouldn't go in unless Fred was there. He ran so fast and he jumped so high that he won every single race, and no one was prouder of him than the little old grey donkey. "Soon you'll be so grand you won't want to be friends with me any more," he said rather gloomily. "Don't be silly," Tarquin told him. "You're my best friend." When the spring came, Tarquin ran in his first big race. Mr. John hired a very expensive horse box, and William was up before dawn, polishing and rubbing and grooming. When he'd finished, Tarquin's coat looked like a great black mirror. Fred stared at him in awe. He really did look like a king today. They led Fred out and put him in the horse box first. "Me?" he thought. "There must be some mistake." Then he heard Mr. John whisper to the driver, "This is a difficult horse, and this old donkey keeps him calm. We want him to win the Junior Gold Cup today, so I'm not taking any risks." Tarquin whinnied with pleasure when he saw Fred going up into the horse box. The special horse box had thick padded sides in case of sudden bumps and swerves. "Fit for a king," said Mr. John proudly, and it was. So Tarquin and Fred talked all the way to the races. But when they arrived, everybody forgot about Fred. "Good luck," he said, as Tarquin was led off to be saddled and bridled. and then the horse box was driven to the edge of a field and locked up. All afternoon, Fred strained his long ears to work out what was happening. It grew hot, and a man came, gave him a bucket of water, and let down the door of the box. But he still couldn't go out to the races because he'd been tied up with a strong rope. In the distance, there were loud cheers. Then it was quiet again. People wandered about eating ice creams and hot dogs. Once a child came up and patted Fred, but her mother pulled her away. "It might bite," she said crossly. "Come on, we're here to see the horses, not a silly old donkey." When at last Tarquin came back to the field, can you see? There was a garland of flowers round his neck, and Mr. John was carrying a gold cup. As they got Tarquin into the box, hundreds of people came, cheering and clapping. "What a race!" they shouted. "What a champion!" Fred was squashed into a corner to make room for another racehorse called Grey Prince. He was coming to live at Hoggart's too. Tarquin talked to the new horse all the way home, and he never spoke to Fred, not even when the donkey whispered, "Well done." It was all Grey Prince now, and the races, and his garland of flowers, and his big gold cup. Fred kept trying to join in, but the other two just ignored him. "He's young," the donkey said to himself, "and he's had a great victory. That's why he wants to talk to his new friend." But inside, something was making him want to cry. I have to say, the story gets a little bit sad now. Now that Tarquin was a champion, William kept him very busy running and jumping out on the hills, and he shared a new field with Grey Prince. Fred, still in the old paddock, never saw him at all, and he felt very lonely. Tarquin didn't love him any more, he thought. One afternoon, two strange boys came up from the village, crept to the gate, and looked all around. When they were sure that nobody was looking, they jumped into Fred's field and grabbed him. They had games to play. One leapt on the donkey's back, dug his heels into Fred's plump sides, and went galloping round the paddock. "Get up, you silly fool," he yelled. "We're at the races. Can't you go any faster? No wonder you can't jump. Your stomach's nearly touching the ground. You're an ugly beast, you are, ugly and fat. Come on, can't you?" Then the other boy joined in, running behind and slashing at Fred with a stick. "You're pathetic," he shouted as the donkey, sweating and panting, with his old heart panting away like a great engine, lumbered round and round. When he was young, he could easily have thrown the boy off his back and chased the other one away. But he was too old now, too frightened, and too weak. "Giddy up, big head," they said, "and giddy up, cloth ears." And he trotted here and there while sharp heels dug into his sides and the thorny stick cut into his back. When they were tired of running races, they jumped over the gate and back into the lane. Now that he was safe again, Fred let out a loud hee-haw. "Ugly brute," one of them yelled. Then the other one picked up a stone and flung it at him. "Let's go and see Tarquin and Grey Prince," they said. "They run proper races, those two." After they had gone, Fred limped slowly away and hid under the trees. When he thought about what the two boys had done, he wept. It was the unhappiest day of his whole life. But one morning, soon afterwards, William paid him a visit. "Come on, old chap," he said. "You're needed down in the village." "Who needs me?" Fred thought sadly. He was ugly and old and fat. He had a great big head and a loud, harsh voice, and he was useless, just something to make fun of and throw stones at. Anyway, he didn't really want to go down to the village because those boys might be there and throw stones at him again. Perhaps something's broken down again and they just want me to pull it. But they went past where the milkman was and stopped at the school. Lots of children were rushing about in the playground. "Hello, Fred," someone shouted, and one of the teachers gave him a carrot. Then they helped a little boy on his back. He was dressed all in white, and he had a long black beard made out of knitting wool. On his head was a crown made of shiny gold paper. "My name's Tom," he told Fred. "I've got the best part in the parade. I'm Jesus." They began with a story, and everyone crowded round to hear it. Fred nudged forward too. He liked stories. As he listened, he knew this was the most important one he had ever heard. The children were going to act the part called Palm Sunday. It was about the wonderful day when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. "Hosanna, praise to Jesus," all the people had shouted then. "Look, your king comes to you, meek and riding upon a donkey." The beautiful words made Fred's heart almost burst with joy. This was about him. When the story was over and the play itself began, William took Fred's halter and they walked slowly down the village street. All the people shouted, "Hosanna! Hosanna to the Son of David!" People doing their shopping looked up and smiled. One lady came out of the grocer's with some sugar lumps. So many people wanted to stroke Fred that William had to stop. "What a lovely donkey," they all said. "Look, he's carrying Jesus." And Fred gave a great hee-haw for sheer happiness. He forgot that he had been lonely, laughed at and beaten, chased round his field till he couldn't go any further, because he knew God had remembered him. And God must love donkeys very much, he decided, to have given one of them such an important job to do, because today it had been Fred, the old donkey, not Tarquin or Grey Prince, who was carrying the King of Kings. So that's a little bit different story for Palm Sunday. But I think it's a beautiful story, because for many weeks I've been saying that man looks at the outside, but God sees in the heart. Lots of people saw just an old, fat donkey. But you know, Fred's heart was a great big heart, and he had a very special day on that Palm Sunday. And Palm Sunday for us is a very special day when we remember that our special King of Kings didn't have a fancy horse to ride on. He came into Jerusalem on a donkey so that everyone knew that it's not what you look like that matters, it's what's in your heart. Enjoy Palm Sunday. Bye.